Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the challenges of facing families with long-term care, we're going to get into that, but first we have a couple of the state's leading reporters. We have a new candidate for governor. We have a new candidate for lieutenant governor. The fields are getting crowded. We'll do that and the big stories of the week, all of that following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, Angela Couloumbis and Steve Esack. Angela worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer and Steve Esack for the Allentown Morning Call. You can follow them on Twitter if you want. We'll put the Twitter, what do you call it? Twitter ID?
Handles.
Handle there. Mm-hmm. She likes that. Yeah. Angela's helping me out here. You can follow them. You get some great insights. All right, I'm going to start with you, Angela. Can we get any more action in the governor? We have a minor figure, right? Nobody knows this guy who's decided to run for the governor. Tell our audience what this is about.
Well, this week we finally heard the announcement, a formal announcement by House Speaker Mike Turzai, who said that he too is now throwing his hat into the ring for governor, making him the third person from Allegheny County now. Fourth. So now there are three Republicans vying to beat Governor Tom Wolf next year, and it's going to be a very busy year in the legislature too, because two of those three Republicans are legislators. Aside from Mike Turzai, we also have Senator Scott Wagner in that mix.
Right, and we have Paul Mango and Laura Ellsworth from Pittsburgh. All right. Tell our folks a little bit about Turzai. Let me just start out with, I'm going to use some words, establishment conservative, and how many different ways can I say alcohol expansion?
Yes.
Go ahead, feed into that.
Mike Turzai, since he's been in the legislature and really in the last number of years, his big legislative priority is to disband and sell off the LCB.
Right.
He has failed doing that in part because the state Senate doesn't want to do that because the LCB gives the state budget a load of
is it
cash.
500 or 600 million maybe? I could be off by that.
This year it was over $211 million,
okay.
And that is not just taxes. That's extra cash the LCB gives over for that. And so they don't want to lose that money because Mike Turzai has been against every single type of tax increase imaginable as Speaker, as leader of the House. So he is a very anti-tax conservative, and he controls, I wouldn't say controls maybe because I don't think they're controllable, but there's a large block of conservative Republicans in the House, and he is, for lack of a better word, their leader.
I would call them, there's two sort of wings in the House, sort of the traditional establishment conservatives and then the populist conservatives that have been in the House, in the last 10 years, but he's vehemently, as Steve points out, vehemently opposed to sales and income taxes, and on the big tax that Governor Wolf has tried to get, the shale tax, same way, right?
He has been, and I think that is actually one of the criticisms we heard right away after he announced, which was that he has been the person really standing in the way of solving the state's chronic budget deficits because of this insistence of not turning to any type of tax increase or new tax.
And not only that is the Senate, when they've passed or agreed to compromises, they've gone Republican and Democrat, your traditional type of compromise. The House under Mike Turzai doesn't want to compromise. They want to do a majority of the majority, which is the Republicans. And in doing that, just take 2015-16 when the state didn't have a budget for 9 months, they had what would have been a sweetheart golden deal for everybody back in another era of politics. That blew up where there were some tax increases, but also some pension changes, some liquor changes.
They're basically, they'll go along with some niche taxes, but not the sales tax, but they're not big on, go ahead, finish my thought.
They talked at some point during this budget impasse, they talked about a new hotel tax statewide. But again, that blew up because there is a very conservative faction, and the numbers have been growing. It's not the majority of the majority yet, but it is significant enough to block these types of.
All right, what we're talking about here is we have Mike Terzai, the Speaker of the House, Scott Wagner, a state senator from York, only senator in Pennsylvania history elected on a write-in. We have a lawyer from Pittsburgh, Laura Ellsworth. She was big with the Chamber of Commerce out there. And now we have
Paul Mango's
Paul Mango, who's a healthcare executive. Thanks for helping me out there. Retired healthcare executive. He's been running a commercial where military, I guess he was in the West Point grad, yeah, so we'll see. All right, I started with you, I'll go back with you. All right, now we have a guy 6'8", right, who never wears a tie, running for lieutenant governor. His name's, what's his name? Help us out. John Fetterman. Yeah, I'm kidding. Yeah. And he's the mayor of Braddock, and he's gotten a lot of national publicity. Tell us about him.
Well, like you said, he grew up in central Pennsylvania, went to Harvard, but then ended up in western Pennsylvania with like a Jobs Corps type of program, stayed there ever since, and has been there trying to revitalize the community, that sort of thing. Like any politician, local, national, state, you have your detractors and you have your supporters, and some people think locally, as I've read, is he's all about himself, but his supporters say he's. We're
going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to get into that, and then we want to talk a little bit about the difficulty with the lieutenant governor right now. Philadelphia Senator Mike Stack was a senator, state senator from Northeast Philly. Mike Stack, he and the governor are not exactly on the same page, an interesting dilemma. We'll do that and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities.
Okay.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, Angela Couloumbis and Steve Esack join me, both reporters. Okay, we've got this situation where the Lieutenant Governor, Michael Stack, and the Governor, Tom Wolf, have no relationship, don't talk to each other. In fact, there's been some interesting developments over the last 2 years. What happened there?
Basically, it boils down to there were some complaints about Lieutenant Governor Stack's treatment of some of his employees, including the state police troopers who drive him and his wife around. It got to the point where the governor ordered up an inquiry through his inspector general's office into this behavior. Apparently there is a report out there that has been completed. Yes, though Governor Wolf has vowed to make it public, it has not been released. In part, although the governor hasn't said this, there is some speculation that it is because the lieutenant governor's wife had some issues and she decided to check herself into a facility.
All right. Right now, Governor Wolf has made no indication of whether he's going to support Fetterman. We don't think he's obviously going to support Stack. Go into a second term with,
Well, yeah, and, it's not just Fetterman. There's rumors that State Representative Madeline Dean out of Montgomery County will run for lieutenant governor. A couple other people have already announced that they're retiring. Yeah, but Mike Stack, too, is just, you saw Scott Wagner trying to use Mike Stack against Tom Wolf. And Mike Stack's political clout, even in Philadelphia, isn't all that great because that city's Democratic Party has been fighting so much, and it fought so much that a Republican ended up getting elected to the State House in Mike Stack's backyard. So there's that.
And by the way, Scott Wagner now has an announced running mate who will run with him, even though they run separately in the primary. All right, I want to get to another. You wrote a big story this week. What was it?
I wrote a story about the recently passed gambling bill that had a big sweetener in there for one of the state's 12 casinos, and that is the Mount Airy Casino in the Poconos. Basically, what it boils down to is this new bill this new law now will allow up to 10 new mini casinos around the state, and the protection that was added in for Mount Airy is that you basically cannot build that mini casino anywhere around Mount Airy, giving it a competitive edge.
You wonder why they didn't do it out in Nemacolin, where there's nothing around there anyway, out in western Pennsylvania. Your story.
Yeah, I wrote a story with Laura Olson, our D.C. reporter, comparing the attendance and voting records of State Representative Justin Simmons and Ryan McKenzie. Both of them are Republican candidates for the 15th Congressional District. Our reporting, compiling the record, shows Justin Simmons has missed 500 and some votes since being elected. It boils down, and his attendance has gotten worse the longer he's been in office. The last 2 years, first year it was like 2%. Last 2 years it went up to 13% and 16% thus far in this congressional or this session. But also Justin Simmons, whereas Ryan McKenzie has only missed like 3 days. He's got a 99% attendance rate throughout his career, and Justin Simmons also goes on Facebook. And we are able to see he posts pictures of himself and issues in the Capitol on days in which he is absent and not voting. So he's given the impression that he's actually in the Capitol.
So he's trying to pretend he's there when he's not there, like he's So now you've been covering, I mean, a lot of members miss from time to time, and a few now and then have chronic and sometimes it's for health or personal.
Right. We did a similar story a couple years back on the Philadelphia delegation. They had some of the worst attendance records. They are still, at least in one of the two chambers, they can be not present in the chamber and still be allowed to vote, at least under a very specific type of leave. So
and that's in the Senate, right?
That's in the Senate. So there is sometimes sort of a bit of an incentive to not be there.
But it depends on whether Ryan McKenzie and Justin Simmons aren't the only two Republicans running in that race, but it depends on how voters are going to take that up.
For our viewers, there are a number of congressional districts in the eastern part of the state. The 11th, where Lou Barletta, who's the congressman, he's running against Senator Casey. That's an open seat. The 15th, that's held by Charlie Dent. The 10th congressional district was going to be open, but Congressman Tom Marino, who was up for drug czar appointment, that's all out now because of a controversy, and he's seeking re-election in a pretty safe Republican seat. I want to thank our two journalists for a wonderful update. We'll see you back here soon. Coming up, the challenges of families with long-term care, a couple of segments you don't want to miss.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Well, Russ McDaid joins me. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association. And as I promoted this is the challenges of families with long-term care. We're now getting into that season where am I right about this? Where families get together, Russ, and these are discussions that we don't like to have, but in fact, we have to have.
Right, and Terry, it's never too early to start that discussion. It'll surprise most people to know that 70% of Americans age 65 plus will need long-term care in their lifetime, and that's for an average of 3 years. I want you to say that again. 70% of Americans 65 plus will need long-term care in their lifetime, and for an average of 3 years. A little over 20%, 1 in 5, will need a nursing facility stay of at least a year. So we often think of this as something that's going to happen to another family or someone else is dealing with, but when it hits home, it's really important that you've started the conversation, around the holiday time.
Look, you're the expert in this. Is this something that we just put off because it's not top of mind and it's not pressing, or is there an uncomfortable? I always felt, God, my mother, passed away. She was in a long-term facility. We didn't think very much about it, so I'm glad you're here. I wish I had had this conversation with you until she had the need for it, and fortunately she got great care. There's no complaint about the care at all. Bottom line here is this something we don't want to do because we don't want to face the future?
Yes.
Or is it just we just don't think about it?
Yeah,
or
yes.
Maybe both.
I think it's a little bit of both. And I think we find that the best way to start the conversation is to ask permission of your loved one. If you start that conversation, Mom, we got to talk, things aren't going well, that's not going to go as well as, Mom, while we're all together this holiday, let's take some time and sit down and talk about something that none of us want to think about, but it's important that we do it now.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, finish your thought.
And ask that permission for a more comfortable conversation about if this were to happen later in life, what would it look like for you? Yeah. What would your choices be as far as the care you receive?
That's very important because often something happens and you can't consult the person who's in need of the health care and you make the decision. They may not be able, they may not be physically or mentally able to make that decision, and you have to make it for them. And most of the time I think people make the right decisions, but that's not the point.
Right, nobody's thinking straight when they're in crisis.
Yeah.
And so when you wait until you're in crisis, that's when decisions that either aren't what the individual would have wanted or aren't in the best interest of everybody involved oftentimes get made.
And the holidays, it's a great time of the year because A, we get together, B, we hope it's harmonious, right? And we're not in some family quarrel. But it's a time when I think we get more open. We talk about our families. We talk about the past. We joke about, the relatives who aren't there. We all have fun doing that. But it is a great time to do it, isn't it?
Well, it's never a better time. You have the sons and daughters that may live elsewhere in the country who are home, and it's a lot less controversial than talking about politics right now. So in some ways, it might be one of the most comfortable conversations you can have around a family gathering when you consider what's happening in the political environment as an alternative.
No, that's a good point. And are the number of facilities, long-term care, increasing, or have they remained about the same?
We've been pretty much steady for the past 5 to 7 years. The place that we see significant growth is in the retirement living sector, that being the senior living communities. They can be branded as a number of things. Some of them are 55 plus, and I keep joking with my kids saying Mom and Dad are headed there. It's 5 short years and I'm going to qualify for the gym and the putting green and the swimming pool.
But you know what, anecdotally, a lot of my friends are selling their homes and moving into those facilities. And I live in Lancaster County where we have a fair number, but but you're right, that's another kind of planning. And we'll have you back and we'll get into that. We're going to run to a break, and I know we got another important subject, lawsuit abuse, that you want to talk about, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives.
All right, Russ McDaid joins me. He's with the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association. He heads that organization. All right, this year you're primarily focused on a piece of legislation that deals with lawsuit abuse, and next year you've got Medicaid disparity. Let's take lawsuit abuse first. jump in.
Thanks, Terry. So we're working on House Bill 1037, and that's a bill to curb lawsuit abuse here in Pennsylvania as it relates to long-term care providers. And what the bill does, it addresses an issue where predatory out-of-state law firms are publishing ads in papers and essentially dialing for dollars, hoping that people who've had loved ones in nursing facilities will call up a number and try to get a settlement. What that does is it takes scarce dollars away from those facilities who are trying to provide care. Mm-hmm. This bill would put a limit on punitive damages at 2.5 times or 250% the compensatory phase. And that's an important piece of this. A lot of people, this doesn't take anybody's right to sue away. Okay. And in fact, all it says is that compensatory number, or the number that makes somebody who sues whole, that a punitive number, or what we like to call the jackpot number sometimes, because that's the concern, mm-hmm. Is that would be so excessive it would put someone out of business. That number can't be more than 2.5 times the compensatory number.
But look, we're now, when this airs, it'll be the weekend before Thanksgiving. The holiday's coming up. The legislature is not known for staying in session. You've got the speaker, as we talked about with the reporters, Speaker of the House, running for what? Running for governor of the state. What's the prospects?
I'm hopeful that they're good. There's never a better time in our mind.
Okay.
And the House is scheduled to be back in the first 2 weeks of December. Okay. And they've got voting days scheduled, and we're pushing very hard to get a fair hearing on this bill. It's important for Pennsylvanians, and it's important for our Medicaid program, which is the second issue we wanted to talk about.
All right. The other thing that, now, obviously that would be in next year, in the last year of the current session. You've got your issue is Medicaid disparity, the underfunding of nursing facilities. Explain to our viewers why that matters. Why should they care about that?
Right now, the amount of money that nursing facilities are being paid by the state Medicaid program is $44.73 a day, or $16,300 a resident a year lower than the state's own reimbursement system says it should be.
Whoa. Why?
Because we've lost touch with reality, because the amount of funding provided in state budgets year over year hasn't kept up with reality. In fact, our nursing facilities in Pennsylvania have been flat funded in 4 of the last 6 years, while funding for everything else from education to infrastructure to public safety has grown. Facilities have been flat funded. And we've been asked to do more with less. We think it's a concern. Yeah. It's unacceptable.
Now, is that a decision that Harrisburg, the legislature, and the governor get to make together? Oh, sure, it's part of the funding package, right?
It's part of the funding package, and this is a challenging issue to be sure. The graph that our viewers got to see clearly shows that gap between what facilities are getting on a daily basis and the dollars they should be getting under the state's own reimbursement system is growing. And it's one of the things that's leading to the challenges we face around workforce and around quality care.
All right, we expect you to come back and keep us updated on these before the year's out, and hopefully next year as well. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Have a great Thanksgiving and stay well.